Hi, I'm Erin. I used to believe silence was how families survived, that if you didn't speak, they wouldn't turn on you. But at 3 a.m., I was on the floor, my shoulder snapped, blood in my mouth, and my mom was filming me like it was a morning vlog. My dad? He looked right at me and said, "Zoom in." They didn't call for help. They called it content. They edited my trauma, branded my pain. And when I tried to fight back, they said I was crazy, tried to lock me away, and sued me for speaking. How do you heal when the people who broke you also hold the microphone? And what happens when you take it back? It wasn't the cold that woke me. It was the sound. A high-pitched clicking, sharp and mechanical, like a camera shutter snapping every few seconds. I opened my eyes to the ceiling lights above, but they weren't on. The only glow came from the refrigerator door, slightly ajar, casting a weak, pulsating light across the floor. My cheek was pressed against tile, cold, wet, sticky. The scent of iron coated the back of my throat. I tried to move, but my left shoulder refused to cooperate. Pain shot through my chest, and then came the nausea. The bile rose quickly, too fast for me to prepare. I turned my head slightly and threw up, blood mixing with stomach acid in a bitter splash across the linoleum. There was no sound of running footsteps, no frantic voices or arms wrapping around me, just the constant clicking. I blinked again, focused toward the kitchen island. There, in the shadows, my mother, holding up her phone, recording. I thought maybe she didn't realize what she was doing. Maybe she thought she'd document for the hospital. Maybe this was shock. Surely she wouldn't just film me. Then I saw her smile. It was slight, just a tightening of her cheek, the kind of smirk someone gives when they've won an argument. Her arms were steady, framed me perfectly. "Mom?" I croaked, barely audible. My voice cracked like dry leaves. "Help!" She didn't flinch. I turned my head slowly. The other shape was standing near the pantry. Dad, dressed in a t-shirt and jeans, holding a second phone, angled from above, like he'd studied the scene. "Zoom in," he said calmly. "Get her face. That'll hit harder." I couldn't comprehend. My thoughts tripped over each other, tumbling like bricks from a loose wall. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't confusion. This was set up, produced. My mind screamed, but my body refused to respond. A trickle of blood from my lip touched the corner of my mouth, and I coughed again, fresh pain lighting up my shoulder like fire. "You're not going to say anything?" I whispered. "Dad, please." He didn't even blink. I looked at my mother again, but her eyes were vacant, distant. There was no urgency, no fear, just calculation. This was how it ends. Not from the injury, but from being betrayed like a sideshow act. I remember being 9, maybe 10, standing in our backyard while Mom told a neighbor, "She's my best friend. I don't need anyone else." What a joke. Those same lips that once kissed my forehead now recorded my collapse. I wanted to scream, but my lungs burned too hot. I tried crawling, dragging my right arm under me while my left hung limp. The floor smeared red and brown behind me, like an artist's palette gone wrong. Above me, the overhead light swung gently. It cast shadows like ghosts. I felt like one of them. Each movement sent fresh waves of agony through my chest, but I couldn't stop. Not yet. Not until I knew. Why? They didn't speak. My father adjusted the lighting on his phone. My mother moved her feet slightly to improve the frame. I made it to the edge of the island and collapsed, breathing hard, trying to understand what kind of parents record their daughter dying on the kitchen floor and call it content. I turned my head toward the counter, the knife drawer, 5 feet away. Useless. I had no strength to reach it. Even if I could, what would I do? I couldn't lift my arm. I couldn't even hold a glass of water. But I could see the table. On it, my phone, screen face down, silent, waiting. If I could just reach it, if I could send one message, one photo, one word, They wouldn't expect that. They thought I was helpless. My body screamed otherwise, but my mind remained sharp. I counted the tiles between me and the table leg. 3 full body lengths, maybe more. The floor was cold, sticky, unforgiving. Above me, the camera blinked red. Recording. My mother's hand didn't shake once. I whispered to myself, if I survive this, I'll remember everything, every detail. They wouldn't get away with this. My fingers brushed against the puddle of blood I'd just coughed up. Sticky, thick, and oddly warm. I traced one letter with the tip of my index finger. A capital R. Dad muttered something under his breath. This'll go viral. Just watch. People eat this up. My mother leaned slightly toward him. Don't let her die yet. We'll lose the views. Her voice was almost gentle, like she was reminding him to pick up milk from the store. Not about whether her daughter lived. Something inside me shattered, not a bone, not a muscle, but a belief. A lifelong, deeply embedded belief that parents don't do this, that no matter how distant or cruel or selfish, there was still some line they wouldn't cross. They didn't just cross it. They danced on it. I stared at the red smear I'd made. My finger moved again. You. My breath caught. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. Pain throbbed again. I tasted iron. The light flickered above. I hadn't even screamed yet. The white lights above me weren't just bright, they were blinding. Harsh, clinical, merciless. I squinted, then winced as a stab of pain sliced through my shoulder and rippled down my spine. There was a brace around my neck, an IV in my arm, and murmurs floating just outside the reach of clarity. 2 nurses stood by the foot of the bed, their voices lowered, but not enough. She's the one from the video, right? One whispered. Yeah. Internet girl. You didn't see it. It's everywhere. I tried to lift my hand, but the bandage around my wrist tugged, anchoring me back to the present. I opened my mouth, but my voice was dry, frayed. Water. The closer nurse looked at me, but said nothing. She scribbled something on a clipboard, pressed a button on the monitor, and turned away. Something was wrong. Not medically, socially. The way people looked at me, the absence of alarm or compassion, the quiet judgment. Where's my phone? I rasped, my throat scratching like sandpaper. It's been held legal processing, the nurse said flatly, without eye contact. Legal. I scanned the room again. No flowers, no family photos, no faces I knew. Only a guard in the corner, half leaning against the wall, watching with the kind of indifference that made my skin crawl. My parents weren't here, but I wasn't alone. 2 interns passed by the hallway window, unaware I could hear them. That clip's already at 1.2 mil, one said. 12 hours. She's viral. 12 hours. That meant they posted it. I could barely lift my head, but when another nurse came in and adjusted the IV, I asked again, more firmly, can I see it? What? The video. Show me. There was hesitation, then curiosity, a flicker of something in her eyes, maybe guilt, maybe nothing. She tapped her phone, turned the screen toward me, and there I was, crumpled on the floor, shoulder jutting out unnaturally, blood on my chin, mouth moving in slow desperation. Overlaid was music. Upbeat, oddly cinematic. Then a title card faded in. When your child acts out for clout. The camera zoomed in, and my father's voice rang clear, steady. Zoom in. Capture her face. It ended on my eyes, wide, raw. They posted it. With a soundtrack. With commentary. They didn't just hurt me, I whispered, unable to stop the tears now. They produced it. They published my pain. That night, those seconds of agony, they turned it into a performance. A nurse fluffed my pillow without speaking, then muttered under her breath, "Maybe you shouldn't have made your family look bad." My pulse spiked. I clenched my fists under the blanket. Later, After the room emptied, I begged the nurse who brought my dinner tray for her phone. "Just a minute," I said, trying to sound calm. She gave it to me with visible reluctance, hovering nearby. I went straight to TikTok. There it was, millions of views, stitched into reaction videos, memes, parodies. A familiar face popped up, a woman I used to follow, influencer, smiling into the camera. "I don't know, guys," she said brightly. "Sometimes kids go off the rails, but these parents, they kept it together. Didn't even react violently. That's parenting." I watched the comments scroll. "She's spoiled. Probably faking it. Looks like a performance to me." This is why you record everything. Protect yourself. Protect yourself. From your daughter? I wasn't a person anymore. I was content. A cautionary tale for parents. A clickbait headline. They used to call me ungrateful in private. Now the world echoed it back in stereo. I gave the phone back. Slowly, carefully. Then I went silent, fully, utterly still. Not because I was broken, but because I was calculating. They turned a crime into a campaign. They branded betrayal as boundaries, and no one questioned it because the lighting was good and the captions were punchy. I asked for my medical records. "Not possible," the attending nurse said. "Chart access is restricted while under investigation." Investigation? Into what? Into me? I wasn't just recovering. I was being processed, not as a patient, as a liability to their narrative. If they control the story, I thought, I need to control the proof. Everything they'd built was fragile, because it was all performance. And now, they'd gone too far. That night, as the ward quieted and the hallway lights dimmed, I buzzed for the nurse again. "My phone," I said. She sighed, then nodded. "Just a minute." She handed it to me, careful, eyes lingering like she wasn't sure this was the right call. I waited until she turned away. Then I typed, slow but clear, to Rachel Sanderson. Subject, urgent. I need help. Message, I need a media attorney. I have evidence. I need protection. Please respond quickly. I hit send. Then I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling, not from fear, but from clarity. I'm not going to let them win. I've seen their playbook. Now I'll write my own. The steady tick of the IV drip felt like a clock mocking me. Each drop fell with the same rhythm, slow and predictable, unlike the chaos inside my head. The nurse had stepped out a few minutes ago, leaving behind a hush so complete it felt manufactured. Hospitals had a way of doing that, turning pain into background noise. I stared at the ceiling, my eyes unfocused, not because of the light, but because of what had resurfaced. Memory wasn't linear. It didn't wait for the right moment. It bled into the present uninvited, like a leak behind wallpaper you didn't notice until the entire thing buckled. Before they filmed my agony, they had already recorded my privacy. I hadn't thought about that night in years. Not really. I'd buried it under grades, responsibilities, internships, anything that required forward motion. But now, with nothing to distract me, the past rose like steam from a cracked floor. I was 17. It was late, around midnight. I'd stayed up writing an essay for AP Lit. The air in my room had that dry, filtered feel, like the HVAC was working overtime. I leaned back, stretched, and caught a red dot blinking in the vent above my bed. At first, I thought it was the smoke detector, but we didn't have one in my room. I stood up slowly and stepped onto the chair near my desk. It wasn't a sensor. It was a camera. Small, black, unblinking. Tucked into the shadows like it belonged there. I stared at it for too long. Not with fear, not yet, with confusion, then suspicion. I didn't say anything out loud. I didn't scream. I just peeled a sticky note from my textbook and pressed it over the vent. The next day, it was gone. Replaced. The sticky note discarded. The vent spotless. I brought it up to my mother. Casually, carefully. "Hey, do we have a new security system or something?" I saw a little light in my vent last night. She didn't even look up from her coffee. You're too imaginative, Erin. Always reading those mystery books. That's not what I... She cut me off. Honestly, it's not healthy to make up things. Do you want people to think you're paranoid? That night, I slept in a hoodie and jeans, under the covers, phone clutched in my hand. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even breathe right. Every creak in the wall made me flinch. It wasn't just about being watched. It was about knowing someone you loved was doing the watching and pretending not to. A week later, I found myself in Mrs. Holloway's classroom during lunch. She was my AP English teacher, the only adult at that school who looked me in the eye without expectation or judgment. She noticed the way I hovered near her desk, fiddling with the cuff of my sleeve. "Erin," she said gently, "you okay?" I didn't have the words, so I said something vague. "Have you ever felt like someone was always watching, even when they weren't supposed to be?" Her eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but concern. She didn't press, just said, "That's a hard feeling to carry alone." "I'm probably just being weird," I added quickly. "I'm not saying anything bad happened. I just feel watched." She nodded slowly. "Sometimes feelings like that come from something real, even if you're not ready to say what it is." She asked if I wanted to speak with the school counselor. I declined. If the counselor called home, everything would spiral. Miss Holloway didn't push. She simply said, "Okay, but just so you know, I'm here, and I believe you." After I left, I found out later, she wrote it all down, logged the conversation, sent a confidential email to the counselor anyway, marked it private, requested no action be taken without my consent. I didn't know she had done that until years later, but it mattered. Now, lying in the hospital bed, IV humming beside me, I thought of her, Ms. Holloway. I wondered if she still taught, if she remembered me, if she had ever stopped wondering whether I was okay. I opened the top drawer of the nightstand next to my bed to find my charger and instead found an envelope. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single piece of stationery, written in soft cursive. I knew. I tried. H. My breath hitched, not from pain, but from the kind of emotional collision that breaks something free. Someone saw me. Someone remembered. It wasn't just that Mrs. Holloway had tried. It was that she still cared enough to let me know, years later, in the middle of the worst moment of my life. I sat upright, ignoring the tug of the IV. I opened the hospital tablet, searched her name. There she was, still teaching at the same school. Her picture in the staff directory, older but unmistakable. I stared at the screen for a long while. I could contact her. I could tell her everything now. No more vague metaphors, no more fear. The truth, raw, complete. I hovered over the email icon, but didn't click. Not yet. "This time," I murmured to myself, "I won't whisper it. I'll write it in fire." The ride from the hospital to Marta's apartment was quieter than I expected. No awkward questions, no strained attempts at comfort. Just the steady hum of the engine and Marta's hand gripping the steering wheel with a kind of intensity I hadn't noticed in her before. She didn't ask about what had happened. She didn't need to. The entire internet had already filled in their own version. When we pulled up to her place, a small, two-bedroom rental just off Hillside Avenue, I felt a wave of displacement. It wasn't the space, it was the stillness. I hadn't felt that kind of stillness in weeks, and that alone made me uneasy. Inside, Marta handed me a blanket and pointed to the couch. "Bathroom's down the hall. I stocked the fridge with stuff you used to like." I nodded, too tired to respond properly, but I meant it when I said, "Thank you." Later that night, I tried using my bank card to order dinner. Declined. I tried again. Same result. I logged into my student portal to check on my fall semester registration. Locked out. Marta stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. "Want me to call the school?" "No," I said, shaking my head. I think it's already done. Done? I looked at her, and the words slipped out like a breath I didn't know I was holding. Has my name already been erased? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. That silence was all the confirmation I needed. I opened my laptop the next morning. Notifications were endless. Articles, reposts, speculative podcasts, comments by people who'd never met me dissecting my face frame by frame. But I ignored them. I was looking for something else. Something practical. When I clicked into my email, I scanned through my sent folder. Nothing unusual at first glance, but further down the thread, past a series of innocuous auto-replies, I found it. A message sent to our family's bank manager. Subject line, urgent transfer approval. I opened it. The body read, as discussed, please proceed with transferring $28,000 from the Educational Trust to our joint account for family investment purposes. Attached is my signature approval. There was an attachment. I clicked it. My name, my signature. A scanned copy, perfect down to the loop of the R in my last name, but I hadn't signed anything. I called the bank. The woman on the other end of the line spoke in her most professional tone. Yes, Ms. Mack, that transfer was processed 3 months ago. It was approved with digital authorization from your verified email. No, I said, heart pounding. That signature wasn't mine. I'm afraid we followed standard protocol. I cut her off. So my mother forged my name, and you let her? She paused. I'm not in a position to confirm that, ma'am. I ended the call. That wasn't just theft. That was orchestration. My future, reallocated. My trust, liquidated with the same ease one orders groceries. That wasn't just identity theft, I said aloud, not caring that Marta was in the other room. That was erasure, with my mother's hands. Later that afternoon, I started digging. The more I searched, the deeper it got. I found a property deed I hadn't thought about in years, my grandfather's house. He'd left it to me. I remembered him saying once, "Your name's on the deed for a reason." I tried to reach Mr. Delano, the advisor who'd handled Grandpa's estate. His office number was disconnected. I called the firm directly. The Delano account has since been reassigned, the receptionist said. May I ask the nature of your call? I'm trying to confirm ownership of a property, 481 Delmar Drive. I believe it's in my name. There was a pause, then typing. Then, that property was sold 6 months ago. No, that's not possible. I never authorized anything. According to our files, the asset was managed under a family guardianship clause for your benefit. The listed guardians executed the sale. My parents, they'd sold it, cashed it out, didn't even blink. I stared at the screen as the listing pulled up in a real estate archive. The house had been flipped and sold again since. Fresh paint, staged furniture, gone. They cashed out my legacy quietly while smiling for their followers online. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, letting the kind of rage build that doesn't burn. It freezes, makes you sharp. That night, I laid out everything on Marta's kitchen table. Emails, screenshots, banking documents, the forged signature, the real estate files, even a photo of Grandpa and me in front of that house. Marta came out of her room, took one look at the mess, and whispered, "You're building a case." "No," I said. "I'm showing the truth." She nodded, eyes skimming over the papers. "This isn't just betrayal," I continued, voice low and sure. "It's systematic fraud. And I'm done asking for answers." I opened a new email, drafted it to both my parents. Subject line, "Stop." I attached the files. No commentary, just facts. But in the body, I wrote one sentence. "If you don't stop the show, I'll pull back the curtain." I hit send. No reply. Hours passed. I ate dinner, watched half an episode of something I couldn't follow. Marta fell asleep on the couch. Then my phone buzzed. A push notification from the family YouTube channel. Deborah and Bobby Mack are now live. Our side of the story. I stared at it. Didn't open the stream. Because I already knew. They used my inheritance to build the stage, and now they're using it to silence me. I didn't wake up that morning with clarity. It wasn't some poetic moment of empowerment. It was more like a slow tightening in my chest, a pressure that wouldn't let up. I sat at Marta's dining table, my laptop open, documents scattered like a map of every betrayal I had tried to ignore. She entered the room with 2 cups of coffee. "You slept maybe 3 hours," she said, placing one down beside me. "Didn't need more," I replied, my voice low but steady. She sat across from me and picked up one of the folders I had printed. My birth certificate, college enrollment, the banking documentation with my forged signature. "This is a hell of a file." I nodded. "Paper makes power visible. If they can't respect truth, I'll make them answer to facts." I wasn't planning revenge. I was demanding recognition. For the theft, for the manipulation, for the silence they tried to enforce and brand as love. We left the apartment just after 10. The courthouse downtown felt too clean for the kind of dirty business we were walking into. I clutched my file tight as we entered the courtroom, our heels echoing on the polished floor. The courtroom wasn't crowded, just a few spectators, some press, and 2 people who used to claim they loved me. Deborah and Bobby Mack entered a full 15 minutes late. They were dressed like they'd been styled for a magazine interview. My mother wore soft gray cashmere. My father had that smug, detached calm of someone convinced they were untouchable. The hearing began with the judge acknowledging the emergency injunction I'd filed. My lawyer, a calm woman named Harper Dune, stood and presented our case. "This video," she said, gesturing to the monitor, "was posted without the plaintiff's consent. It includes intimate images captured during a traumatic incident. The defendants monetized the content, resulting in reputational and psychological harm." Their attorney stood. A man with 2 white teeth and a habit of adjusting his tie before speaking. "This is a case of documentary expression, Your Honor. A family responding to difficult circumstances by showing transparency, not exploitation." The judge didn't nod, didn't speak, just tapped a pen against her notes, then asked to view the footage privately. We waited in silence. No eye contact between me and them. Just the ticking of the court's old clock and the shallow breath I refused to let become a tremble. When the judge returned, she didn't waste time. "Consent must be explicit. The footage shows a minor in distress, used for public gain. Video use is hereby suspended. All revenue from distribution is to be held in escrow pending further action." I felt nothing in that moment, not joy, not vindication, just a calm that came from knowing the first wall had cracked. Outside, I didn't speak to reporters. I simply held up a copy of the court's ruling and kept walking. Cameras flashed. Microphones pushed forward, but I didn't flinch. Later that day, Twitter was flooded. #SheSpoke. In silent screenshots of the ruling, clips of me leaving the courtroom, my name trending next to words like strength, justice, and daughter. An old high school photo of me smiling in a yearbook was posted with the caption, "She was always the quiet one. Now she's the loudest truth they can't delete." Influencers who had mocked me began deleting their posts. A few issued apologies. One, a mental health advocate I had respected, tweeted, "That girl doesn't need treatment. Her parents do." I thought that would be the end of it. Then the letter came. A white envelope slid under Marta's door. No stamp, just my name, scrawled in rushed cursive. Inside was a single page. "Enclosed are admission papers to Harmony Pines Restorative Center. Check-in is scheduled for Monday. Transportation will be arranged. With love, Mom and Dad." Below it was a signature page with their contact info listed as primary emergency contacts. There were boxes already checked, authorizing limited phone use, therapy sessions, monitoring, no box for consent, because mine wasn't needed. I folded the paper neatly and tossed it on the table. "They're trying to silence me another way," I said aloud. Marta picked it up and scanned it. You know what this is, right? A last-ditch effort. If they can't win in court, they'll try to discredit me, frame me as unstable. She tilted her head. You going to laugh or cry? I let out a short, sharp laugh. Let them try. I've seen their moves. I've already built my next one. That night, I filed a second lawsuit. Emotional manipulation, attempted false institutionalization, malicious intent to control public perception. Marta looked at me across the table. This will escalate things. I looked her dead in the eye. I'm not on defense anymore. I'm drawing the damn line. I signed the paperwork, and if they cross it again, they'll learn what happens when silence gets sharp. I recorded the first episode just after 10 p.m., sitting on the edge of Marta's guest bed, using a $40 mic I'd borrowed from a friend back in college. I didn't rehearse. I didn't draft an outline. I just spoke. My voice didn't tremble, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I was tired of letting fear steer the wheel. Welcome to Framed by My Family, I said quietly into the mic. My name is Erin Mack. You might know me as the girl from the video. I paused, letting the silence breathe for a beat before I continued. What you saw wasn't an accident. What you saw was calculated, staged. What you didn't see was everything that came before it, and everything they've erased since. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I told my truth like it was a report, steady and brutal. I walked listeners through the forged emails, the stolen house, the therapy trap, the blackmail. I ended with one line I'd practiced 100 times in my head but never dared to say aloud. Consent is not silence. Marta listened from the hallway. When I finished and turned off the mic, she walked in, placed her hand on my shoulder and said, You didn't just speak, you set something on fire. We uploaded it that night. By the time I woke up the next morning, the episode had 423,000 listens. The hashtag #LetHerSpeak was trending. Screenshots of the court ruling had gone viral. Someone had clipped my final line and set it to soft piano. Thousands of users stitched their own stories of being silenced, manipulated, erased. I didn't check the news. I didn't read the comments. Marta filtered everything for me, giving me only what mattered. A New York Times columnist wants to quote your statement, she said over coffee. And there's a request from NPR. I shook my head. Not yet. Let the story be the story. Still, something inside me shifted. The silence that had been used to bind me was now breaking under its own weight. I had said something real, and it had echoed. But with light came shadow. The email arrived 3 days later. Subject line, Don't get too loud. The sender's address was a meaningless string of numbers. Disposable. Attached was a video clip, no more than 45 seconds. It took me 10 seconds to realize what it was. Me, sophomore year of college, mid-breakdown. Sitting on the bathroom floor of my dorm, screaming, shaking, mascara running down my face. No shirt, just a bra and a pair of sweatpants. Hair clumped at the back from where I'd torn it during a panic attack. I had no memory of it being filmed. Below the video was a single line of text. Next time you try to play innocent, this goes live. I sat there, frozen, as the clip looped silently. My worst moment, my most vulnerable, weaponized. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and drank it slow. Marta entered, her eyes wide. You okay? I handed her the phone. She watched the clip and turned pale. They recorded this? I don't remember it, I said. But yes. Erin, this is blackmail. No, I corrected her. This is a threat, and threats require answers. That night, I recorded episode 2. Title, The Moment They Want to Use Against Me. I didn't wait. I opened the episode with a few seconds of the clip. No sound, no context. Then I paused it and spoke. That's me. I was 19. I was having a breakdown. I wasn't broken. I was healing. I didn't know someone was filming me. I didn't know they saved it. But now I do. I explained the truth about my mental health, about the years I spent trying to hide it to keep their image intact, about how shame was a weapon in our house, handed out like dinner napkins, useful, disposable. If you own your wounds, I said near the end, no one can weaponize them. They stop being bullets. They become armor. The episode went live at 11:04 p.m. By morning, it had crossed 1.2 million streams. Comments flooded in from therapists, survivors, journalists. One user wrote, "This is how you kill shame." Another said, "She turned their blackmail into a broadcast." But the biggest shock came from a tech whistleblower. He reached out through encrypted email. "I work in cloud security," he wrote. "I used to freelance for your father's IT team." That clip? It was stored in a private cloud directory labeled Emergency Leverage. Timestamp confirms it's been there for 3 years. I read the line again and again. Emergency Leverage. They were still watching me, still saving things, still thinking they controlled the narrative. I closed the email, locked my phone, and stared out the window. If they want war, they just got the wrong soldier. I woke up to Marta's voice calling from the living room. Her tone was clipped, the kind she reserved for moments she didn't want to alarm me, but always did anyway. "Erin, you need to see this." I pulled myself out of bed slowly, my body still sore from weeks of physical and emotional hits. When I reached her, she didn't say anything, just tilted her laptop screen toward me. The thumbnail on YouTube was enough. A carefully posed photo of my mother, her hand resting gently on my shoulder in a shot I didn't even remember being taken. The video title, Our Side of the Story. I clicked play. Soft piano music played underneath a narrator's voice, my mother's, calm and rehearsed. Raising a child isn't always easy, especially when they suffer in silence. We've tried everything, and we continue to love her, even when she hurts us deeply. They had taken the footage from the kitchen but removed the audio, softened the lighting, and added transitions like it was a Hallmark docuseries. The part where my father ignored me, gone, my mother's smirk as I begged for help, replaced with a freeze frame of her reaching toward me, probably a moment she scratched her face that they twisted to seem caring. "They're not defending," I said quietly. "They're rebranding." And they were good at it. That afternoon, I received a DM on Instagram. The sender was Claire, an old friend from high school I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, random," it began. "But your mom reached out. She was asking if you ever had issues back in the day. Like emotional instability stuff?" My chest tightened. I checked my inbox and found 3 more messages like it. People I hadn't spoken to since prom night now getting calls and texts from Deborah Mack, spinning a story I'd never told and they had no business sharing. One person wrote, "Your mom said you once faked an injury in college for attention." I didn't know what to say. I knew exactly what this was. They were rewriting my past to destroy my present. I took screenshots, every message, every reply. I made a folder, titled it False Memory Project, because that's what this was now, a curated lie, pushed hard enough to become fact. "They're trying to drown the truth in whispers," I told Marta, who just nodded and passed me another post-it note to log every name they contacted. So I hit back, my way. I created an online live stream titled Not Their Narrative. I didn't announce it, no teasers, no trailer, just a quiet drop with one pinned comment. "You've heard their story, now hear mine." But I didn't speak first. I invited others. Ms. Holloway, my high school English teacher, joined and read from her journal, the notes she'd kept from when I came to her at 17. She had copies of the emails she sent, all marked confidential. She held up a manila folder. "This is what support looks like when no one else is watching." Then came Andre, my former RA from college. I saw her after midterms one year, curled up in the laundry room with shaking hands and bruised ribs. She said she tripped. I didn't believe it then. I should have said something. Each speaker was calm, measured, and devastatingly honest. When I finally took the mic, the chat was flying so fast I couldn't read it. Still, I looked into the camera and said what needed saying. The truth isn't cinematic, but it's mine, and it won't disappear because they polished their version better. By morning, the stream had passed 1 million views. Sponsors began dropping my parents. One by one, family-first companies issuing apologies for premature alignment with a personal matter under legal review. People began reposting side-by-side comparisons, the edited family video versus the raw footage I had leaked days earlier. The internet didn't just call it out, it obliterated it. Comments flooded their original video. We saw the cut. We saw the control. This isn't parenting. This is PR. She begged for help. They zoomed in. Deborah's Instagram vanished. Bobby posted a one-sentence note on his business page, blaming online toxicity. I scrolled through it all and muttered, "They built a weapon out of my story. I just sharpened it back." Just when I thought the worst had been aired, another email came. No subject, no greeting, just one sentence. "This ends now. You speak again. We bury you with what we know." Attached was a photo, blurry. A younger version of me, maybe 16? I didn't recognize the moment, but I recognized the implication. This wasn't over. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a chill I couldn't reason away. The document came in a zip file, anonymous sender, no subject line. Marta looked at it like it was radioactive. "Could be a trap," she warned. "It's not a virus," I said without looking up. "It's a confession." When I opened it, my breath caught. There it was, an actual contract between my parents and a PR agency I'd never heard of. The heading read, "Family Integrity Branding Strategy, Client, Deborah and Robert Mack." There were clauses, cold, clinical clauses. Maintain image of family unity at all costs. All coverage involving the daughter must frame instability as a mental health concern. If client narrative is publicly challenged, activate Stage 2 reputation defense protocol. Jesus, Marta muttered, reading over my shoulder. They hired people to spin your trauma like a product rollout. I nodded slowly. This isn't just about shame anymore. This is marketing. They used me as the friction to justify their faith-based family values image. Marta began drafting my script while I set up my stream equipment. We didn't use the fancy ring light. No background filters. Just my raw face, a standard mic, and the truth. "If they want a show," I said, adjusting the camera's focus, "I'll give them the unedited version." The title of my live stream was simple: Truth Bought and Paid For. At the exact same moment, my parents went live from a hotel ballroom. Drapes of burgundy and gold framed the stage. Behind them, a screen scrolled testimonials from sponsors and funders. A big, bold banner read, "Rebuilding Trust in Modern Families." I didn't dress up. I didn't rehearse. I pressed record. "Tonight," I began, while my parents broadcast their redemption arc from a gala paid for by donations and partnerships, "I'd like to talk about what it cost to build that stage." I held up the contract, zoomed in on it with my webcam. This document is not fiction. It is not leaked rumor. It is signed, notarized, dated, and it states in plain terms that my instability was part of their strategy. I played a recorded call next, sent by a former media contractor who couldn't stomach their tactics anymore. His voice crackled through the speakers. "Your daughter's pain is marketable. It builds empathy metrics. Keep her close enough to look like reconciliation, but far enough to keep the conflict alive." Back on their stream, my mother was telling the crowd, "Families aren't perfect, but we grow stronger through adversity. That's what this journey has been for us." I dragged a file into the stream window. The full contract, page by page. Viewers flooded both chats. One wrote, "What else are you hiding?" Another, "Is your daughter even invited to this gala?" The tipping point came quickly. I pulled up the sponsor list. Dozens of well-known companies with messaging tied to unity, parenting, and trust. As I scrolled, I said, "These are the names funding a lie. These are the brands turning a blind eye." Then I did what I had promised myself I wouldn't, what I'd debated all afternoon. I overlaid a clip. It was short, silent, just 30 seconds, but it showed me lying on that kitchen floor, bleeding, reaching, and them recording. The timestamp in the corner matched the contract's approval date. They'd been signing endorsement deals the same week they filmed my collapse. I turned back to the camera. What kind of parent uses trauma as a pitch deck? Within 5 minutes, my viewership tripled. Comments streamed in faster than I could process them. A split-screen video comparison went viral. My stream versus theirs. Then, the impossible happened. Their stream went dark, cut mid-sentence, frozen on Bobby's face as he looked off camera, mouth half open. The comments shifted. Unsubscribes. Screenshots of emails to sponsors. Hashtags. Hashtag cancel the max. Hashtag not family values. I sat back, heart pounding, not out of panic, not even relief, just the weird stillness that comes when the sky finally splits open after days of warning. Later that night, a message pinged on my phone from one of the very companies listed on the sponsor sheet. "We were unaware. Please accept our apology. All agreements with the Mac brand have been terminated." A few hours after that, a journalist wrote, "She's the quiet storm that shut down the noise." I forwarded the message to Marta, then turned off my phone. The next morning, my parents' lawyer released a single-line statement. "We are pursuing legal options." I laughed for the first time in what felt like weeks. Not bitter, not angry, just amused. "Funny," I said aloud. "So am I." I started to shut down my stream dashboard when a new email popped into my inbox. This one stood out, not because of who sent it, but because of the subject line. "From your grandfather's old attorney." The message inside was short. "You should know, he left you more than they claimed." I stared at the screen, unblinking, and just like that, I realized the story they sold wasn't even theirs to sell. The email from my grandfather's former attorney sat open on my screen while I stared at it like it might dissolve if I blinked. I read it 3 times, then again. "Ms. Mack, this file was left in trust with our office for delivery upon your 30th birthday or upon public legal dispute involving the Mack estate. You meet both triggers. Please be advised, this trust is distinct from the known estate distributed by your parents. They had no legal access to this account. To claim it, you must appear in person. They couldn't touch this. Only you can." Marta hovered nearby with a mug of coffee in hand, watching me read. "Is that real?" "It's from Henry's original lawyer, Granddad's guy." "Jesus," she whispered. "So they lied about everything." I nodded slowly, a strange mix of fury and something else. Grief, maybe. But it wasn't grief for them. It was for all the years I lived thinking I'd been forgotten, when really, someone had tried to protect me. It gave me a strange peace, but not enough to stop what came next. The message came through a secure email, different sender, former employee from the family's old PR team. His tone was cautious but direct. "I watched your stream. I can't stay quiet anymore. I was there when your father told us to remove the part where you were crying for help. I muted the audio myself. I'm not proud. Here's a drive link, full files. Use it how you need." I clicked, downloaded. Inside were videos I hadn't seen, raw, uncut, and gut-wrenching. One clip, time-stamped the same night of the kitchen floor footage, showed my father kicking me after I slipped trying to stand. It had been edited out of everything the world saw. I didn't cry. I didn't blink. I watched in silence. Then I hit play again. I needed to burn it into my memory, not to stay angry, but to stay sharp. By noon, I had printed everything, screenshots, metadata, even the audio logs. I slid them into a binder labeled Legacy. And then I called the only journalist I trusted. Vivian Tran had made her name dismantling influencer fraud cases. Her style wasn't sensationalist, It was surgical. We met the next morning in a quiet cafe downtown. She wore a denim jacket and no makeup, her bag heavy with camera gear and a notepad already open. I handed her my file. She flipped through the pages slowly, expression unreadable. "Do you realize how far-reaching this could be?" I nodded. "You sure you want this public? It won't be clean." "No part of this has been clean," I said. "But if I don't speak, someone else like me will never be believed." She leaned back, nodded once, then slid the folder into her bag. "This isn't a scandal, it's a pattern." The exposé aired 2 nights later. Headlines scrolled across every major network. "The family lie that built a brand." They played the unreleased clips with a trigger warning. They ran the contract quotes, the sponsorship breakdowns, and the call logs from my parents' PR firm. Social media didn't just explode, it detonated. Former fans of my parents rallied online under a new hashtag, #BoycottTheMax. Within hours, every brand pulled out. Donation plaques with our family name were removed from libraries and schools. A wellness app issued an apology for featuring Deborah's parenting advice column. But the letters, those were different. Hundreds of them. Some angry, some confused. But most were stories. I left home at 17 because they tried to fix me instead of listening. My parents filmed my breakdown and told the church it was spiritual warfare. My mother edited my story into her success. I read each one, slowly, gratefully. "They tried to erase me," I whispered, "but now they'll never delete what I exposed." I finally allowed myself to sit down, to breathe. It didn't last. A ping broke the quiet. Another email. Subject: "There's one more thing you should know." It was from the same law office. Attached was a PDF, a notarized letter, signed in my grandfather's name, dated 3 days before he passed. It read, "Erin, if you're reading this, they failed to stop you. I knew what they were capable of. I knew they'd sell the house, claim the fund was empty, frame you as unstable. That's why I created a second trust, sealed under your name alone. You were the only one who saw the cracks early. You were the only one with a voice they couldn't shape. Whatever happens next, don't flinch. They feared your voice before you even found it." And at the bottom, scribbled in his familiar script, were the last words that cracked something open in me. "They feared your voice before you even found it." I didn't expect the world to respond the way it did. I'd grown used to people ignoring truth until it became too loud to scroll past. But that morning, it wasn't me trending, it was them. I blinked away sleep and pulled my phone off the charger. The first headline read, "The Jackson Lie, Faith Family Brand Implodes After Exposé." Another one, "Family Fame Fueled by Fraud, Influencer Parents Face Legal Heat." I sat on the edge of the couch, phone in one hand, mug in the other, as Marta scrolled beside me. "Your mother's name is number 2 on Twitter," she said, "right under a Super Bowl ad boycott." I took a sip, let it sit on my tongue before swallowing. They used shame as a smokescreen. Now it's smoke from their own fire. Within hours, the local school board had issued a statement. All plaques bearing the Mack family name would be removed pending investigation. That included the library, the music hall, and the annual Mack Excellence in Character Scholarship Fund. Character. That one stung. Church leaders began releasing statements too. "While we have admired the family's efforts in community building," one pastor wrote, "we cannot stand behind manipulation masked as testimony." A former collaborator of theirs reached out to me anonymously. "We were told never to speak to you directly, that you were fragile, dangerous, capable of making us look bad." I laughed. They feared I'd talk. They never imagined I'd be heard. Even the PR firm that had signed them, the one that orchestrated their family values narrative, issued an official apology. "Our team failed to vet content honestly. We regret our role in perpetuating selective truth." Marta scrolled through comments as I listened. This one says, She didn't just speak, she dismantled the whole show. And she wasn't wrong, but the cracks didn't stop there. Later that afternoon, I received a voicemail from a woman who identified herself as an investigator from the Department of Health. Miss Mack, I'm calling regarding an open inquiry into fraudulent insurance claims tied to Deborah Mack. We believe you may have been listed as a minor receiving services that never occurred. We'd like to ask a few questions. I called back immediately. Over the next 30 minutes, I answered everything, gave names of facilities I'd never visited, explained the therapy sessions that only ever existed on billing statements, not in real life. I forwarded my hospital records, my college attendance logs, everything. They didn't just control my story, I said to the investigator. They sold it, piece by piece. The case expanded overnight. Multiple mental health facilities under review, billing codes tied to my name, prescriptions I never picked up. When I hung up, I called my attorney. We're filing to freeze any remaining assets linked to the insurance claims, Harper told me. The court is likely to grant it with this much pressure. Public sentiment is very much in your favor. You sure? I asked. Erin, your podcast is being cited in trauma recovery forums. You're a case study in surviving narrative abuse. A quote from my last episode had already gone viral. If they built the lie with my silence, I'll build the truth with my voice. That night, I lit a candle and sat on the floor of Marta's living room. The soft hum of her laptop playing lo-fi music made everything feel almost normal, calm, like I'd stepped out of the storm. Then the doorbell rang. Marta froze. I stood slowly, my chest tightening, not from fear, but from the knowing. The kind that settles in your gut when something inevitable finally arrives. There it was, a certified envelope, hand-delivered. Inside, I found it. Official court summons, Jackson 5. Mack. Filed by Deborah Mack and Robert Mack. Basis, defamation and loss of public standing. I read it twice. Marta hovered. What now? I folded the document and slid it back into the envelope. They want another stage? She raised an eyebrow. I smiled, calm, cold, the kind that no longer needed permission to fight back. I'll build the whole damn courthouse. The envelope was pale yellow, the kind my grandmother always used. No return address, just her handwriting, delicate but still confident, spelling out my name. Inside was a single photograph. It was old, faded around the edges. A porch swing, sunlight through trees, my grandfather's arm around my shoulder, my grandmother on the other side. I must have been 7. I was holding a sandwich with one hand, the other tugging at my grandfather's sleeve. On the back, in pen, she'd written, "Family isn't who keeps you close when they need you, but who stays even when they don't understand." I didn't cry because I was hurt. I cried because I finally felt seen, really seen, by someone who'd never asked me to be anything but myself. It wasn't a photo of legacy or brand or curated public image. It was just us. Before all of it, this was the only piece of my past that hadn't demanded my silence. Later that day, I drove to her house. Not for closure, not to mourn. Just to sit across from her in the sunroom and say thank you. She made tea. No fanfare, no questions. "You've been louder in silence than any of them with microphones," she said as she poured. We didn't talk about the lawsuits, or the sponsors, or the lawsuits they'd filed against me in retaliation. None of it mattered here. We looked through old albums, laughed at awful sweaters, cringed at childhood haircuts. She pulled out a photo of me in 5th grade. My head bent over a spelling bee card, teeth clenched, hands clenched tighter. "You always fought hard for your words," she said. I looked at her and smiled. "Thank you for remembering who I was before they tried to erase me." When I left, the air outside didn't feel heavy like it usually did. It felt honest. I parked down the street from our old house. Not theirs, mine too, once. I walked the neighborhood alone, past the old swing set where I scraped my knees. The mailbox that still had a faint outline of our last name, though the current owners had painted over it. A neighbor saw me. He waved politely, the kind of wave that says, "I remember," but also, "I'm not going to say anything." Small towns never forget, but they're real good at pretending they did. I remembered birthdays where I sat waiting by the window, dinners eaten in silence while my parents clinked wine glasses on Instagram, church services that ended with hugs in the lobby and cold shoulders in the car. But then I thought of a message I'd received just last week. "I left my family too. You saved me." The cost was high, but the voice I found, it's mine, and it's not going back in the box. That night, I opened my voicemail app. The most recent message was from my mother. Her voice cracked on the first word. "We never wanted this, Erin. You ruined everything. You made this impossible." I didn't flinch. I didn't throw the phone. I just hit delete. "You didn't raise a daughter," I said out loud. "You raised a witness." Then I opened my contacts list, scrolled to their names, deleted both. Erased? Clean. Not out of hate, but out of necessity. I couldn't carry their names anymore. I couldn't carry the weight of daughter when it had always been a one-way transaction. So I opened the government website. Name change request. I typed in every field carefully. First name unchanged. Last name, my grandmother's maiden name. Before I clicked submit, I paused. There was no hesitation left in me. Just the understanding that this step, wasn't about revenge. It was reclamation. Because sometimes, freedom starts with the name they can't use to hurt you anymore. The cameras were already swarming by the time Marta and I stepped out of the car. They lined both sides of the courthouse entrance like vultures waiting for movement. But I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just walked, folder tucked under one arm, my spine upright like I was carrying the weight of more than just papers. Inside, the room was colder than I remembered, not in temperature, but in tone. My parents sat across the aisle, their faces trained in public grief. Deborah wore soft pastels, like she was headed to a prayer circle. Bobby was clean-shaven, tie just slightly loose enough to look human. Beside them, two attorneys I didn't recognize. Flipping through binders like this was just another business pitch. Harper, my lawyer, leaned toward me. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." The judge called the hearing to order. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but you could feel their absence screaming from every corner. Today's hearing is to review countersuit claims filed by the defendants and evaluate the counterclaims by Ms. Mack regarding defamation, manipulation, and monetization of trauma. Harper stood. "Your Honor, we present not just evidence of harm, but a documented pattern of strategic exploitation, digital tampering, and intentional misrepresentation for monetary gain." Then I stood. "I'd like to speak directly to the court." The judge nodded. "You may proceed." I stepped forward, voice calm. "This isn't about a story, Your Honor. It's about truth, sworn truth, not a version filtered through performance. I was made into content. My pain was sold. My identity was used to build a brand. And today, I ask this court not for vengeance, but for correction." The room held its breath. Cross-examination came next. Deborah was asked about the forged signatures, the therapy invoices billed to insurance companies for sessions that never occurred. I trusted our legal team," she said, voice trembling just enough to feel rehearsed. "They said it was standard protocol to preserve family structure." Bobby jumped in. "We were managing a brand. We didn't realize how far it had gone. We only wanted to help our daughter heal." Harper raised a brow. "By recording her collapse for views?" The judge interrupted. "Let's stick to questions." I watched my parents deflect, redirect, hide behind advisors and vague phrases, but they didn't lie convincingly. They unraveled. After a recess, the court reconvened for the verdict. I stepped outside while we waited. Press gathered like fog on a cold morning. I wasn't scheduled to speak. I hadn't told Harper I would. But I walked up to the mic anyway. 3 years ago, I began, they told me to be quiet, that healing came from silence, that family came first, that everything else, my truth, my body, my name, was negotiable. I paused. The flashbulb snapped in rhythm. They taught me silence. I mastered clarity. I listed the sponsors who had backed their campaigns, the media platforms that enabled the framing, the pastors who ignored my questions and reposted their edited story. And now, I said, I name myself, not as a daughter, but as a survivor. I am no longer theirs to define. I folded the paper and stepped back. A few clapped, most just stood in stunned stillness. Back inside, the judge returned with a final ruling. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Erin Mack. All monetary damages associated with digital content will be awarded. The defendant's countersuit is dismissed with prejudice. Further, all accounts tied to the disputed branding will be frozen pending audit. Deborah fainted in the hallway. Bobby didn't even look at me, just stared at the courtroom floor like it might split open and swallow him. I walked past them both, didn't say a word. This wasn't revenge. This was realignment. That night, at home, I took my grandfather's final letter, the one about my voice, and framed it, hung it above my desk like scripture. Then I opened my podcast app. New title, new logo, The Unnamed Truth. Episode 1. I Was Never Yours to Ruin. I recorded it in a single take. 6 months later, I received the National Media Integrity Award. I wore a simple black dress. My grandmother sat in the front row, Marta beside her, camera in hand. When I accepted the award, I didn't give a speech. I just smiled, because the verdict was never theirs to give. But I gave myself one, freedom. And for the first time in years, I wasn't surviving. I was living.